founders, WVON DJs, and this year we're doing music, and we've chosen history makers from different genres, jazz, blues, classical, and R&B. And they'll each be, it's a live panel discussion where we give some historical background to the development of professional musicians in Chicago, and then each person will speak to their experiences. We typically have an audience of 300 for that. It's February 17th. And we also do a display in the windows of Carson Perry Scott, the department store downtown, and to promote the various programs. And the B.B. King program will air here in Chicago on February 8th. And does everyone do we list where it's all going to be aired?
Crystal can go over it, but
yeah.
WNET in New York has picked it up. And
WNET, San Francisco, it should be airing. I don't have a date in San Francisco yet. It's also going to be airing in Maryland on the 31st of January, and I can give you the time soon. And it's
New Jersey,
Memphis,
Florida.
Memphis is going to air in Memphis.
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, and that's about it. And DC, WHUT is going to air.
Were we meant to see an excerpt from it? Is that what we were watching?
I can do
Okay.
that, yeah.
All right.
If I ask real quick,
Do
I
we
have
have
some
the-
connections in public TV. Have you presented this demo whatever to every station?
Yes,
Or
we've
just-
approached Atlanta as well. Too,
Okay.
So.
Like I say, I have a good friend who's the head of programming.
Oh,
for-
that would be helpful.
Not in
Great.
Atlanta, but I could get you a connection there. But I have a very good friend who's head of programming, Bruce Dunn, at the PBS station in Daytona Beach, which covers Orlando.
Okay, okay,
So
great.
talk to me later, and
Okay.
I can get something to him and
Okay, great.
follow up.
If you haven't ever seen the programs, they follow a format of the Behind the Actors Studio, sort of an intimate conversation between friends is really what it's like. And it's the first program that we did, the Evening with Harry Belafonte, still airs regularly on stations around the country. So we come into the office and at about midnight, and somewhere it's aired, and there are about 10 messages that people want to order it. So it's always nice to know that it's still happening. So February.
I can go over
March. March is our salute.
We've started this whole thing with salutes to our history makers, because as we used to combine the salutes, and there's an award that was developed by a local artist here. And so we're doing salutes. The Hilton Hotel has stepped up, and we're going to be doing salutes here in Chicago on March 13th, April 30th in Washington, D.C. We'll be in New York in September. We're hoping we'll do something at the Waldorf Astoria there. And then we'll be in L.A. in November. And the two here in Chicago and in D.C. we're hoping will be fundraisers. The others we're looking at fundraisers. So those are happening. And then in May we're doing, the Brown versus Board of Education programs going all across the country. And so here they wanted to focus on the arts, and I had our contribution to the panel was Lloyd Richards, who is the most preeminent black theatrical director, and directed the first production of Raising the Sun on Broadway. So they're putting together a panel, and we're sort of part of that. We're part of the Illinois Humanities Council is doing a series of programs. They did take one of our programs that I wanted to do, a woman named Jenny LaGunn, who's the most preeminent black tap dancer of our time. She was feted at the Smithsonian last year, and she had contacted me because I'm usually suspect with people calling saying they're a history maker, but she had seen the article in the New York Times, and she's in her mid-80s and still tap dances, so we were able to get some funding to bring her here. She's originally from Chicago South Side and lives at Vancouver, British Columbia.
She was at the Smithsonian last fall. Nan went and did a little bit of tap dancing along with some other people that were there. She's incredible.
Yeah.
There's a documentary film that's been made about her called Living in a Great Big Way. And so we're going to show the film and then have her live, there to answer questions and to address the audience. And that's in July at the Museum of Contemporary Art. And
then that's pretty much it. And then we'll do our 5th anniversary here. That's pretty much it, except our evening this is our first time that we'd be taking it on the road, so we're hoping Atlanta will welcome us warmly. And Walter Massey has agreed to be our honorary co-chair. Ingrid Sander-Jones from Coca-Cola is making it nice for us. You'll meet tomorrow our Atlanta coordinator, a woman named Cynthia Moreland, who couldn't be here. She's in Atlanta, but on her way back here, and she's going to be moving back to Atlanta in May. So I'd like to, thanks, anything else, Nicole? Okay, I'd like to speaking of coordinators, I'd like to turn it over to Amy, who's our DC coordinator, to talk about the role of the coordinators and the regional offices and our friends.
We're pleased in DC to have the history makers there. I guess most cities, but everybody thinks their city is the best city. We have an awful lot of wonderful stories to be told in Washington. You've got government, you've got international, you've got longtime DC people. You've just got a whole lot of people. So we have since July, as Juliana said, we've sourced and interviewed. Scott and Larry have been to town more times than they would like to to say, but we've done some fascinating people, including Gus Hawkins, who's in his 90s and was chair of the Labor and Education Committee in the Congress for many years, Edward Brooke,
Oliver
Hill. Julie considers Washington area anywhere from Delaware down to Richmond and beyond. So we
North and South Carolina.
Yeah, North and South Carolina. So our challenge is to find key people and weave them and get them interviewed and weave them into a story, a regional story, as opposed to just an individual stories, because individual stories connect, in different places. So we did John Hope Franklin too, which was fascinating. So that's one of our challenges. The other one is to raise money to support the organization, so that in fact we can support interview and videographer and have our own little team right there in Washington, so that we can move around and do the various interviews. So basically we're doing sourcing, scheduling, interviewing, and fundraising. We are having a salute on April the 30th in DC, and we're working on developing Friends of DC History Makers, so that we will indeed have resources and awareness in the area. What else, Julie? So it's exciting. It's an exciting time. We're really just kind of tippy-toeing into it, and looking forward to having a good year in Washington, D.C.
And I just want to say this, that Amy has brought, she's a very organized person, and she's, I don't know, whatever, I don't know what email captain, but, because we only get a small fraction, but she knows an incredible number of people, so she's helped us open doors in ways, and she comes, a lot of people like her and have respect for her, and so she's gotten us interviews that would have been very hard to get otherwise. And that's really critical, because as I was telling someone at the end of the table, I recently did George Johnson, who was owner of Johnson Products. He, I didn't realize until reception for Harold Washington to celebrate his administration, that he had been putting me off for like 3 years, when he had just decided to do the interview. So you can waste a lot of time with people sort of, taking you around. But we don't, I won't say that we've had a lot of people say no to us, but it's the issue of how do you get to people, and how do you source them, and how do you prioritize, and pay for it and all of those things. It's really a juggling act. So this whole thing of coming to things with a mission, I mean, I go at this as if it's, a battle, and I'm going to win. And the thing is that it has to have that, because people die. Over the weekend, 3 of our history makers passed away. Etta Moulton Barnett here, who was 102, Jacob Brothers, who is a well-known educator, who had, yes, he died, and then Elma Lewis out of Boston. And so it showed, and E. Rodney Jones, we didn't interview him, but he was one of the good guys, right? WV on the good guys.
That might, oh, I'm sorry, I was gonna say, that might be a PR opportunity, if you haven't thought of this already. Not that you wanna use their death, but, say, so-and-so died, they're famous for such and such, or whatever. As a matter, and as a coincidence, we've interviewed them, they're part of the history makers, and use that as a come on to explain and get some more publicity.
That's right.
On one of our summits, planning summits, someone said, that really struck me like a rock, that every time someone dies, it's like a library being burned down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just makes it more urgent to get people, the older, as old as possible, but there are many, the history makers doesn't say you have to be a certain age or older, but of course we want to get the older people because, we have less time with them, so.
Just for what you were saying last night on public television in Chicago, they ran a clip about Etta Moulton Barnett's life with photos from the History Makers Archive, and Juliana was on making.
Oh, so they reran that.
Yeah, they reran it last night. Yeah, I saw last night.
Yeah, and then we saw, now, people do pirate, and that's the other, that is, because Scott told me, there was something on Etta Moulton on WGN, and he saw our watermark.
I think right off the website.
And that's why we won't have the archive, the digital archive on the internet. The internet's a wonderful thing, and I'm having Nicole set up a tape I've been showing around. But I'd like, speaking of which, Edward, I'm going to have you, after we see the tape, do the website, but can you talk about our website statistics? Because I was actually visiting you. I was in Washington, and I got this email that he had sort of looked, and you have to understand with our site, I didn't, I worked on the site quite a bit. A lot of the things that we have were donated to us at the beginning, and I went and got a company to donate the first site that looked nice, and then I was able to get some state funding and have someone who would work with us, and a company that has worked with us from the beginning to do our back end. Our back end is very well developed. Even though that company has gone out of business, the person who was originally our back end developer miraculously we found in Florida, and has continued to work with us. So part of our site was actually developed in India, but back end. But the whole thing, it's intended to be a sampling tool for the archives. Really not much more, but a sampling tool. Because I've seen, especially, I'm very adamant about this, because I've seen how much has been taken from our site, and we can't really monitor it. That's not going to happen, because there's a push in the library community to put a lot of things on the internet, but people are seeing that causes a lot of other problems because it's sort of a wild, wild west. And so we have to protect our resource in that way. But do you want to go over the stats a little bit?
Sure.
Edward, quick, can you do it from over there? I'm sorry, it's just like...
Give someone else a badge.
Right, let's make quarters now.
Don't be offended by the catch.
You didn't get a copy of that.
What I handed out here is just a few, it's a slightly revised version of an email I sent out to the staff one day. It's about some interesting things I've noticed about the users to our website. And as you can see there, most people end up on our site. Yeah, that's a very odd one.
That'd be a financial opportunity.
I have some news stats from January too that are up in my head right now. I'll tell you about in a second. But most people use AOL, and that's how they end up on our site, and they don't stay very often, unfortunately. However, as you can see, we get a lot of foreign visitors, and they are staying. They're learning a lot. A lot of those are coming from foreign universities too. It's very interesting. Oxford University, we get a lot of hits from, and they really explore the site a lot. And let's see. You'll also note we are linked to a German music website for our Evening with B.B. King program. It's a fan site for B.B. King, and they're very excited about the program, so they put a link on there, even though we couldn't read a word of it. And all said and done, there are 274 other websites out there that have direct links to us, and we need to increase that. And hopefully we can set up partnerships with other history websites, have them link us, we'll link to them, and that will increase our traffic flow even more. Then, as you can see, in the top 10 domains that can visit our site, most of them are .coms. Then we get .nets and .orgs, which are networks or nonprofit organizations. We also get a lot of government. Does it say how many? Yeah, over a dozen government agencies, and today we had, I think, 15 visitors from the USDA looking at our website, and they looked at over 40 pages per visit. I don't know why.
Oh wait, they're supposed to be paying attention to mad cow disease.
Like-
What's that have to do with?
No, I'm saying probably that's, I'm just guessing that, getting prepared for Black History Month. Also, Google, whenever you put in anybody's name,
Yeah, we're
almost always
the first
history
one.
makers
It's
are
at
on
the
top.
top.
Yeah,
Right.
almost always.
Oh, that's good.
Interesting. Well, but you must be doing the right thing then, if that's happening.
No, we haven't done anything, but we're
Really?
about to, no, we haven't.
Yeah.
That's why I was so surprised. We started out, when we started, we had like 1,000 hits per month, which is like nothing. So those were not stats you brag about. So, I mean, we have not had time to really pay much attention to the site. And there was a whole period of time I was lagging about a year. And there were, it was sort of, as people would say, do you need help with your site? It's a beautiful site, but your stuff is outdated. But anyway, we really push, our event, because we always like to have everyone who we've interviewed for our event. So Edward came in when he was doing like this, we called it bio writing boot camp or hell. And so we had to do a lot of bios in that short period of time. But anyway, we have about 1.5 million hits per month. And that's without any real work. There are things that we can do and what we intend to do. We also are in the process of starting an e-commerce section. This should be done by the end of January, and online registration for our events, and also online donations. So we've got the template, and we're making progress for that really to happen. So that's one of the things Edward's doing, is really we're working together to get the content revised and on, and make it happen. But there are things when you go with the search engines, we're like 70th or 80th on the list when you type in African American history. That sometimes you have to pay your way into. There's a whole process, and so that and it would be great if we could have an official relationship with AOL, which I've known some organizations to do.
Yeah, they have that whole research and learn, on AOL
Right.
education section, and it seems to me it's pretty slim.
Right.
Like they
right.
kind of ignore that.
Right.
There might be a push to get
Right.
listed on that.
If we can get, but
Oh,
it's more difficult, and then, websites take work, but the thing is that we know that it is a real educational resource that we have there. We actually are going to be having a separate, part of our education institute that will have codes where we'll have curriculum support materials that have been developed that are on there. So it's, like I said, this is a very exciting time in our development, and if we don't have has everyone seen the site?
Yes.
So you don't need to really see that part, okay?
There are some changes that are being made even as we speak, pretty much. I've been working today on the e-commerce site. That's starting to take shape a little better. But it's, for me, it's a lot of just trial and error because I've never done this before, but I am getting it to go. So like I've been adding graphics to it today, things like that.
What is the e-commerce?
Well, what we're gonna be doing is all of our videos are for sale on there, and all of that, and then also we're having online donations set up, and hopefully we can get it set up so that people can just, if they want to sponsor a History Maker, just go right in, plug in their information, and they're sponsored. It's done automatically.
Your videos are for sale?
Like evening with programs.
Oh, okay.
Not the individual.
No, we will not
No,
sell.
interview.
Okay, I have to say something, we have a position, we will not sell videos. We want to give each History Maker a copy, but we don't promise them, because we are way, way behind. Until we can get our system set up, you cannot be out promising people will get interviews, but we want to do that. We had even thought about renting videos, but we don't want people copying. We're afraid of where it'll end up. And so that is why we've sort of taken the position, even with our paper records and our archives, because everyone has to give a questionnaire, which is like pulling teeth a lot of time to get the people. We've made the decision we won't make the questionnaire available sort of as a record. We could revisit that. But, sometimes people have cell phone numbers and, personal addresses and things like that, so we won't do that. But the interview itself, the transcript, other background research material, those things, will be made available.
Edward mentioned the Sponsor History Maker program, which
Right.
we didn't really talk
Yeah,
about.
this
so-
is really our most important initiative this year. This is something I've been trying to get off the ground for 3 years, but it's going to have to happen this year. And the whole thing is really that we're trying to get individuals, corporations, organizations, to sponsor History Maker interviews at $2,500 to $5,000. The $2,500 will get you in. And we want to get 300 people to do it, which would mean 750,000, which would be huge. It would employ all of us in this room. And it's really critical that we do that. There has to be some ownership, taken on the community. There really is no money out here for oral history interviews. Those Story Corps has gotten money, but that's another issue. I've got to investigate, but there's virtually no money out here. And Nicole talked about the out of project. Out of project meant that I had contacts, basically. Julie Anna Richardson.
Open it.
Oh. No, I was going to take a break. But I want to show this tape first, and then we're going to take a break.
A quick question.
Yeah. And please ask questions, yeah.
I've been doing interviews for administrative history for the Tuskegee Airmen Project,
Yes.
National Park Service.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm wondering if that's a part of what you plan to do in administrative history, interviewing the interviewers, interviewing you, and those of because this is a part of an important part of history.
Right. We haven't done that. There's been thought of it, but no, there hasn't. But I know that would be valuable. Okay, but we haven't done that. And I keep saying every year, I was going to document things as I sort of went along, and I made a promise I would do that, but we haven't done that. That's right. And we should. I know. I know. But anyway, I would like to show this one tape. It's a tape I've been showing around. I want to say a couple things. How video looks is really important. We shoot on Betacam SP, which is the only thing that's recognized archivally. A lot of people, in the video area look at me like, go crazy, because they're these beautiful digital, they're like a fraction of the size cameras that are out. But and I asked, there's a guy named Howard Besser out of New York who's sort of the industry expert right now as it relates to digital video. And he, DVD, CD-ROM, 3 to 7 years is their longevity. Film lasts the most. Film lasts 100 years, paper lasts the most if preserved correctly. Video will last 50 years, preserved correctly before you have to migrate it over. There's a digibeta that, the National Archives is using, but that's like way more expensive, so we're preferring to stay with Betacam SP. But how it looks is really important to me. I emphasize to people who are not working with us or don't, whatever, I say, please, if you're doing your own projects, try to make it look as good so it will have other uses, So I'd like to just show this tape. It's just, for little clips.
Whoa.
Oh, this will have to be in it.
Give us a minute.
Okay. But, this is only a small, little bit of the thing. We have two-person crews. Yeah. Okay. We have, two-person crews. It's the person, the videographer.
Well, trying to get another.
Crystal. Crystal. Did they all sign?
Well, I still need about 3 of them.
Okay.
Could you?
Oh, I'm
sorry.
Major effort.
But,
Only professional
No.
civil rights worker in the whole state of Mississippi. Within months after we went in 1961, we must have had 25 to 30 people working in Mississippi. The attitude of the NAACP and other organizations was it was too dangerous to work here. I witnessed Medgavor's murder. But we said, that's precisely why you have to go here.
One of the first messages Vietnamese gave us was that, and they always called us from the time we get to campus, it was young men. Young men. This is a segregated city. You might have to ride a segregated bus to go downtown. But gentlemen do not pay to be insulted. Never to go to a movie house and pay to be segregated.
My great-grandfather, Aaron Holloway, was one of, he told me that he only knew he was one of many children, and he had a sister that lived in Cleveland, Ohio. And then he told me about his other brothers and sisters. And I said, well, where are they? He said, they passed. They are white now. But where are they? They're all parts of the United States. So they went on, that Holloway side went on to be white. In Little Rock, per se, I know my mother's, at one time, I think they had white on there for a card, like at the library. They would look at her and then write it down. One day I was watching a show on television that John Oliver Killens and Gil Noble, who had a show called Like It Is, and he was interviewing John Oliver Killens about the Harlem Writers Guild. And I was like, I heard of that. And I didn't even know it was still in existence. And he talked about how they meet and all this, and I mean, by now I've got a little suitcase full of stories that I haven't done anything with. These vignettes and all this kind of stuff. But also I've written this short story called Mama Take Another Step. And so I called them. They said, just send your work and we'll let you know if you get accepted. And I was like, well, okay. So I did, and I got in, and I started meeting with this group of wonderful writers, some of whom are being published right now.
He was responsible for having Hammerstein change that. It said, there's an old man called the Mississippi. That's an old man I would like to be. What does he care if the world's got trouble? What does he care if the lands ain't free? Do you know what the original words was? Niggers all work on the Mississippi. Niggers work while the white folks play. Then take me away from the Mississippi, take me away from the white man boss and all that stuff. Those were the original words for that verse that started Old Man River. And then they changed it to colored folks work on the Mississippi, and then they changed it to here we all work on the Mississippi. And Paul Robeson went a step further. And it became his protest song. He turned a song around that had the word nigger in it to make it his protest song. And it was this: there's an old man called the Mississippi, there's an old man I don't want to be. what does he care if the world got troubles? What does he care if the lands ain't free?
As African Americans, we cannot break a tie with Africa, no matter how hard we try. We cannot break a tie with the America in which we live, because we do live in it. Therefore, it became a thing, to my way of thinking, of not reconciliation, but of wisdom, of knowledge, of understanding, of probing into, delving into, and coming out of this complex of these two cultures mixing in with each other, coming out of that with a not necessarily new culture, but a new knowledge of self and a new feeling about being.